Hello everyone and welcome to U.S. Embassy Dhaka and Desh TV's special program, A Conversation with Bangladesh, Bangladesh's Shatayada. In today's program, we're discussing partnerships and looking at the issues of regional economic integration, entrepreneurship, and civil society. To help us discuss these issues, we're joined by a talented panel of young businessmen and women and social entrepreneurs. Hello and welcome everyone. And we're very excited to have with us our special guest, U.S. Assistant Secretary for Economic and Business Affairs, Mr. Jose Fernandez. Sir, thank you very much for being on our show.
Michael, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So tell us, what brings you to Bangladesh?
Well, a number of reasons. The main reason is that we were having our second annual partnership dialogue with Bangladesh. This is a dialogue that was started last year by Secretary Clinton, and we had it this year here in Dhaka. And it was an opportunity to talk about our trade relations. It was an opportunity to talk about investment. And of course, one of the things that many of us were concerned about was also the labor issue and the workers' rights issues.
Thank you. So you mentioned partnership dialogue. I'm wondering if you could go into it into a little bit more detail. What does the partnership dialogue mean for the United States and Bangladesh's relationship?
Well, you know, Bangladesh is the world's seventh largest country, seventh largest, most populous country. It's a country with which we've had great relations since the beginning of since independence. But we needed a dialogue to be able to talk about some of the things that we were doing right and some of the things that we could improve on. So, for example, our trade in the last 2 years has increased by 11%. In the last decade, trade with the United States has doubled to over $5 billion. That's a good side of things. But you know, we also needed to talk about what else we could be doing. Bangladesh right now to the U.S. exports basically garments. That's all that it does. But our duties will allow Bangladesh to export many more products than just garments. So we talked about what else we can do, what else Bangladesh can export to the U.S. We also talked about what is that the U.S. could do to try and help Bangladesh as it works to improve its labor rights and its building safety codes.
So you mentioned Bangladesh's garment industry. Certainly that's an important factor in the Bangladesh-U.S. relationship. As you know, it's a $20 billion a year industry. It accounts for about 30% of Bangladesh's GDP, and actually about 40% of its contracts are with American buyers. And unfortunately, it's been an industry that's gotten a lot of attention recently, unfortunately, through the tragic Rana Plaza collapse this past April and the Tazreen fashion fire this past November. And of course, everybody is working to prevent these kind of accidents from happening again. But what is the United States doing to help improve the working conditions for Bangladesh factory workers?
You know, Mike, you're right. The incidents of the last few months, the fire, the building collapse, has been in the forefront of our hearts and minds in the United States. And in fact, one of the things that we've done at every meeting when we've been here is to give our condolences to the people of Bangladesh for the tragic events of the last few months. And something that has struck me as I've been in Bangladesh, as I've talked to a number of people, is just the civic spirit of people here in Bangladesh, what they did in order to help those unfortunate souls who were under the rubble and what they try to do to help. But that just underscores the need to do better. And in fact, one of the things that we've been working on here is something we call the Better Work Program, which is a program that we do together with the ILO, with the International Labor Organization, to find ways to improve labor standards, to find ways to make it easier for unions to be organized here. Because one of the things that's pointed out in the tragedies here is that those workers had a voice, that those workers had an opportunity to say, I'm not going to go back into that building. I need better conditions. Some of those workers would have survived. And that's something that I think, it's a humanity problem. It's not only a Bangladeshi problem. It's a responsibility of the companies, of the American companies that purchase those garments. It's a responsibility of the factory owners. It's a responsibility of the managers. It's a responsibility of the customers in the U.S. that buy those garments. So we all have to find a way to work together to make sure that those things don't happen again. What we're trying to do in the United States is to talk to our companies. As I said, we've got programs such as the Better Work Program to do what we can to help improve labor conditions here. But at the end of the day, What's going to be needed is that kind of effort, that kind of conviction that was shown by the young people who went to the rubble to save the people under the rubble. And it's gonna take everyone here in Bangladesh to work together going forward to make sure that those unfortunate events do not occur.
You're right, and as we saw the Rana Plaza collapse for the rescue efforts, it really was an all-hands effort, and some of our panelists actually were a part of those rescue efforts. I wonder if Korvi Bhai, if you could talk about what you did and what your volunteers did from Volunteer for Bangladesh.
So we were not a proper rescue team, but we thought that as a citizen, it's important that we react with whenever is needed. And when we saw the news that a 9-story building fall and there is no proper coordination of work, we thought maybe as we are a bit trained of handling a large crowd, we thought maybe we can go there. And as we saw that when there's a fire on Bosundhara, the fire trucks could not enter because there were so many people blocking the streets. So what we did was initially we started just clearing people and helping the police to go inside and help. Later on, at one point, we got request from the law enforcement that if it's possible for us to go inside, provide them with logistic supports, for example, oxygens, cutters, gloves. There was also a storm one day when we had to go with the waterproof materials so that they can keep on working. We were clearing the roads for the ambulance to go to take the patients. That's basically what we were doing at the ground, but where are we getting all these supplies from? So we used the social media. There was a team who was giving a live update that this is what is required. And there was a common point in Dhaka because it's not possible for everyone to go there. And the situation there was very chaotic, so it's not possible. And it's quite far from Dhaka. So there was a central point where we were collecting all these things. And every 3-4 hours, there was a team who started from there with all these things. So that was, I'll say, a small part of what we did at Rana Plaza tragedy.
But just think of this story. You're talking about 50 kids in their 20s, no training. They had a group of I call them kids, of young men and women who, they were volunteers, and they were volunteers to help teach. They had no training in this. That kind of spirit, if you can take that kind of spirit and you can corral it, can do a lot of good. I remember when you guys were quite young, but I lived through September 11th, 2001 in New York, a searing moment in my life. 3,000 plus people dead. One of the things that happened in New York is everyone felt the sense of helplessness. Here was this tragedy, you're part of humanity, you want to be able to help. And what we did in New York, people would just snake around the hospitals in order to give blood for the wounded. But that sense of helplessness that you feel, you can either do two things. You can either sit back and feel helpless, or try and take matters into your own hands. And what you guys did was the latter. And that's exactly what I think all of us who are involved in the garment trade, be you a customer, the person who buys the shirts, or the factory owner, or anyone else. We've got to be able to be a proactive actor in order to avoid this tragedy from happening again. We've got to fight against helplessness, and that's something that I'm just, I'm in awe of what they did.
Absolutely, and I'm sure, Diya, you can empathize with this sense of helplessness. You helped find employment for several of the Rana Plaza survivors. Is that right?
Yeah. So basically, the thing was there was so many segments to the whole process. First you're on the ground, you're working with the rescue teams, you're getting people out of the building. Then what? Then to go to a hospital, you need to get a proper treatment, you need to get proper medicine. And then because you're under such a lot of duress, you don't really have enough money to help your children. They need to eat at home, they need food at home, so you need some level of money supplies to come in to run the family while someone is getting the treatment. Mm-hmm. And then immediately you're worried about getting a job because these people are always on the streets, they have a very fixed income, there's really very little saving. It's all actually, it's continuous expenditure, so where do you go next? And I think understanding that process and then really coming in the right place, I think that was what kind of we were trying to focus on, where we could come first. And we thought that because there was a large group of people on the grounds with the rescue team, our work should be more with the hospitals. So we work with trying to help give them medical supplies, getting them gloves, getting people together and creating databases, helping the families, making lists, because these lists are going to be important after the whole rescue is over. Who are you going to help? Who's missing? Who's not missing? And the entire process. And I think that's where we thought we could work. And the second thing that was basically working with employment. So a lot of really, really good garments or jute mills or different kinds of factories came from us saying that, okay, these people are jobless, they're completely helpless, they're very bewildered, what can we do now? We can take 100 people, we can take 50 people, we can take 20 people, send them, we'll take them, we'll hire them, and we started negotiating salaries. Okay, they got this much there, what can you do better for them? Can you give them a better workspace? Sure. Some people said, I'll take care of their kids. I'll make sure kids going below 5th grade, they can go to school, and I'll make sure they have a scholarship. Somebody committed to that. Somebody else said, I'll take care of the women. I'll make sure they have a place to stay, because if they have small children, it's hard for them to find a place to stay in a different area. Things like that started coming up, and I think that's where the coordination was also needed. And like Korvi said, there was a complete lack of coordination in the entire space. So really finding out the right places and then helping other people to come forward saying, if you can come to me, I can go and distribute. So this, and having meeting points throughout the whole process, I think that was really important.
That's, it's, when something like that happens, you can either be an actor or you can be a victim. And I mean, it's just, as I said, I just very much admire the work that you've all done. And it goes beyond the immediate moment. One of the things, Mike, that I've been talking about as part of our economic dialogue is Bangladesh around the world, one of the things that it's known for, certainly in the last 20 years, is this amazing level of development that it's reached. 5, 6, 7% growth for the last 20 years. You've brought millions of people out of poverty, and very importantly, you've brought women into the workforce as well. And yes, it is still a less developed country, but it is a country with hope. It's a country that at some point will become a middle-income country if it continues down this path. That's a good brand. That's a Bangladesh brand that you want to keep. Mm-hmm. But I think the recent events, one of the things that it has done is it's brought us to an inflection point in the Bangladesh brand. And I would say that there's a danger that Bangladesh brand will become a tainted brand. So we're really at a crossroads here. Will that spirit be used in order to further the Bangladesh brand? Will you say, well, we're not just going to deal with the consequences of the problem, we're going to try and deal with the problem itself? And if that's the action, then what we have been saying is that the United States will help. We will help in terms of getting our labor unions involved, getting the International Labor Organization, pushing customers, pushing companies to do the right thing by Bangladesh. But it's going to take that effort, and it's going to take that effort because one of the things that I have learned in the private sector, and I've got to believe that many of you who are in business know that, is that a brand is a really fragile thing. If you've got a good brand, it's wonderful. But man, you do something to that brand, and all of a sudden that brand starts suffering, and it's no longer that great brand. And I think we stand at the point where we're in danger that the Bangladeshi brand will become a tainted brand. And if that happens, then what will occur is not only will the business community make less money, but I think the kind of development that you've seen in this country for the last 20 years will slow down. And that's something that I think would be a real tragedy as well.
Time for a short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to A Conversation with Bangladesh. We're discussing regional economic integration and entrepreneurship with U.S. Assistant Secretary Jose Fernandez. Sir, while we're on the topic of branding in the garment industry, I'm wondering if we can bring in Alif Rahman. He's the executive director of Northern Group, which is actually involved quite heavily in the RMG sector. So Alif, I'm wondering if you have any comments on this issue.
First of all, welcome to Bangladesh. And the events in both the Tazreen Fashion and Rana Plaza are tragic for the industry as a whole and the country and the international community. But it has already happened, and what we can learn from it is the most important thing. I think it needs to be a collective effort from the government, from the buyers, as well as the garment owners, to make the workplace safer for the laborers or the workers of the factory. The government, if you're talking about the government needs to step up its disaster management. So if in any case disasters like this or accidents like this happen, how do they manage such a problem? That's one of them. The other thing is we already have the laws in place, but the enforcement of the laws often is not taking place. So we need to enforce these laws, proper licensing authorities, enough fire inspectors, enough factory inspectors to actually certify proper workplaces for the workers. If you're talking about the garments owners, they need to step up, and they need to actually make their factories in places where it's safe, as well as have the awareness of, you know, if a disaster like this happens, what they need to do and what are the safety precautions they need to have in their factory so that it does not turn out to be such a big disaster. And for the international community or the international buyers, what I would like to say is I was reading an article the other day, and the Workers' Right Consortium, NGO based in the UK, they said if we add 25 cents to every piece of garment which is being exported from Bangladesh to the rest of the world, we can make the workplace a much better place for the workers. So these 25 cents can be passed on to the consumers. I'm pretty sure the consumers in the US or the UK or the rest of the world does not mind paying this 25 cents extra, but it can make the workers' life a much work environment for the workers. Apart from that, the other thing that H&M, PVH, which is Philip Van Heusen, they signed an agreement, the fire safety agreement, and thereby they have legally committed to helping the companies where there is need of renovations. They'll have independent inspectors as well as leaders from the trade union and the workers' representative working round the clock to make workplace safer, as well as they'll give financial help to make this workplace safer, which is very important for developing countries like us.
Alif, I couldn't agree with you more. It's got to be a concerted effort, and it's what I was talking about. You're either a victim or you deal with the problem. And I think what you're talking about, you know, however you end up doing it, I think being proactive about it is exactly the way to go. And you know, something that I've done while I've been here is I've made sure that I talk to every sector of the industry. I've spent time with the BGME, which is the Bangladeshi Garments Manufacturers Association. Went to a couple of factories, talked to a number of union leaders, talked to a number of the companies, both U.S. companies and European companies. And I'm glad to see that they all recognize that there's more to be done. And I think they all, and also the government, they recognize that it's going to have to be a concerted effort.
Just to add what we were discussing right now and picking up from what Mr. Fernandez just mentioned earlier about adding more products into our trade basket. As much as it's important for Bangladesh to safeguard brand Bangladesh, as well as to retain the GSP status, as well as to keep the garments industry going in the short term, I think as industry and entrepreneurs, we also need to think about diversification in the medium term and in the long term. And I think through the process of the dialogue that the two countries are having right now, I think it's a very good opportunity whereby a very matured economy like the US can help Bangladesh in terms of diversifying away to other potential sectors that Bangladesh has great opportunities in terms of light engineering, manufacturing perhaps as well, through technology transfer or through enhancing the skill set of the existing workforce.
One of the items in our dialogue, in our partnership dialogue, was exactly what you're talking about. As I mentioned earlier, I think, out of 5,000 potential products that are eligible for duty-free import into the U.S., out of 5,000, Bangladesh only exports to the U.S. 116 products. So you're actually leaving almost 95% or more of the potential products here. And I think one of the things that we talked about, and one of the things that if I were a business person in Bangladesh, I would focus on, is what other products could I bring into Bangladesh, into the United States, duty-free. One of those, would be food items. There are a number of others. What we've been trying to do as well in Bangladesh with U.S. investors is to talk about a couple of things. Number one, the need for energy in this country, and we've got a number of U.S. companies that are quite active here, and they still want to be active and want to continue doing business here. Companies like Chevron and others that have made big investments and want to continue doing that. There's also a lot of interest in pharmaceutical manufacturing. And that's a great industry because not only does it bring jobs, but it also brings the kind of research and development, the kind of knowledge transfer that every country wants. So I think on the diversification front, think on both sides. Again, it's both a mutual challenge and a mutual opportunity, as consultants like to say. It's about exporting more different types of products, and it's also about getting more investments from the U.S. that go beyond the traditional garment industry, because that's going to be hopefully a good industry.
So the thing that we were concerned about during the Sawar incident as well as the Tazrian incident is that the world was saying ban Bangladesh, ban Bangladeshi items and this and that. So we know that ban is not the solution. We wanted to know what is your comment towards that.
Well, I think you were getting a lot of reactions around the world. I think you were getting people who were frustrated, and I think the level of frustration was palpable. People who were saying, look, how much longer can this go on? How much longer will defenseless laborers, defenseless women be forced to work in unsafe conditions? And so I think a lot of it was frustration, but I think one of the points that we have said in the U.S. is we've got to find ways to help the situation. We've got to find ways, either by working with labor unions, with the International Labor Organization, through programs, to provide the kinds of technical assistance that's needed, which is not going to be only the United States. There's going to be a lot of other countries, but also to talk about with the government here about some of the items that our own citizens are saying we need to do with Bangladesh. And so one of the points that we've made with our colleagues from the Bangladeshi government in this partnership dialogue is the need for labor law amendments that will try and deal with some of these problems. So yes, I agree with you. It cannot be although it's understandable, a level of frustration that says, just cut out Bangladeshi products. It's got to be a helpful response, and I couldn't agree with you more.
We were having a conversation with U.S. Assistant Secretary Jose Fernandez. We'll be right back. Welcome back to A Conversation with Bangladesh. We're discussing regional economic integration and entrepreneurship with U.S. Assistant Secretary Jose Fernandez. Sir, civil society is a huge driver behind this kind of change that you've just mentioned, and Bangladesh's young civil society are very active beyond just Rana Plaza rescue efforts. I'm wondering if you could share what the U.S.'s thoughts are on Bangladesh's civil society.
Well, one of the things that I think young Bangladeshis, should be proud of is how vibrant the civil society is here. Places, groups like Grameen, groups like BRAC are known around the world. They are admired around the world, and it's not just in the garment industry incidents where you hear about them, but you hear about them in on educational issues. You hear about them on women's rights, and we've got to find ways to try and and increase the connections between these civil society groups and civil society groups around the world. You know, you have a country where I think, if I'm not mistaken, 80% of the people are under 40.
Nearly.
Nearly, something like that. And I mean, that's that kind of vibrancy. I think you've got to take advantage of it. It's called, you know, sociologists will call it a demographic dividend. You know, it's how you get the benefits of having so many young people. When they get old, it's different. It's a different story when you get to my age. But I think civil society has a huge role to play, and what we'd like to do as part of the U.S. government is to encourage, you know, respect for civil society, to encourage government officials to understand that civil society can play a role, can be a catalytic role, can also be, can ignite movements, can ignite solutions. And what we've done around the world is to try and help our civil society groups in the U.S. to again, to create linkages and also to be helpful with civil society groups here in Bangladesh. I think that's a huge opportunity, and I think you will see the United States doing more and more to try and create those linkages.
A great example of that kind of linkage is with Volunteer for Bangladesh. Korvi Rakshand actually participated in a state exchange program, the IVLP program, where he went to the United States, and you went to the AmeriCorps headquarters. Is that right? Do you want to share that experience and tell us how that led to Volunteer for Bangladesh?
Yeah, in 2010, I was lucky enough to visit United States for a month through IVLP program, International Visitors Leadership Program. And I was in 5 states, and I was lucky enough to visit the AmeriCorps head office. And I was actually at that time suffering to deal with how do we exactly address so many young people. Initially, Jago Foundation, the mother organization, basically focuses on children's education. But with time, we realized that there's so many young people who wants to come and work, and they have diverse plan, and Jago probably cannot afford to have all of them, and one organization cannot focus on everything. So we thought, how can we create a platform where young people can work? And at that time, I was visiting AmeriCorps, and I learned about their policies and how one individual can come up with a plan, and then they like-minded people get together and they start working on the project. So I came back, I applied to his State Department for a grant, and was lucky enough, and today, in 2 years, almost 2 years, we have established this platform in 21 districts, and with 10,000 volunteers right now working. And this show will be over if I start mentioning the projects that they do, because it's mostly what we want to do is empower these young people to focus on their own districts rather than me sitting in Dhaka and deciding what's the best. Right. We want them to participate, because as we were saying, that the participation is very important, and especially in Bangladesh, where 70% of the population is under the age of 40, you need them to come on board.
You know, I'm a big believer in civil society. If you look at, you know, I was very involved in my university, and we were very proud that we sent the highest percentage of students both to Teach for America, which is a very good organization in the U.S. that basically goes into underprivileged cities, and it's just, you know, people 25, 24 years of age right out of college, and they go teach, and also the Peace Corps. So there's a number of these organizations, and you know, this you've got to find if you're lucky enough to have the opportunity to do something for others at your age, that's something you ought to grab. And I think a good friend of mine, who's the prominent development person, has said to me several times that the hardest thing to do with civil society is to work on the delivery, not so much the intentions. You know, one of the things that he would always tell me is development and civil society is the only kind of job where good intentions are oftentimes enough, and that shouldn't be. The hard part, everybody has good intentions, but that shouldn't give you the pass. What should give you the pass is the delivery. You know, how can you translate those good intentions into actions, into real improvement? And that's if you can learn to do that, if you can organize yourselves to do that, that's where the value added is.
We were having a conversation with U.S. Assistant Secretary Jose Fernandez. We'll be right back. Welcome back to A Conversation with Bangladesh. We're discussing regional economic integration and entrepreneurship with U.S. Assistant Secretary Jose Fernandez. This exchange is a great example of integration of American ideas and Bangladeshi ideas. But let's look more broadly now to regional economic integration and this new Silk Road. In the press, we've heard a lot about a new Silk Road. Last year, Assistant Secretary for South and Central Asian Affairs Robert Blake was in Bangladesh discussing this new Silk Road. And our Ambassador Mozina has said extensively that Bangladesh really is the center, the regional center of all this connectivity. Can you explain what the new Silk Road is and what it means for trade in the region?
Well, there's a saying, I don't know who said it, who said geography is destiny for a country. In fact, the Mexicans have I was just in Mexico, the Mexicans have a saying that goes, Mexico so far from God, but so close to the United States. But in this case, geography is actually, comes to the help of Bangladesh. You're right smack in the New Silk Road, what we call the New Silk Road, which is basically the ability, as someone has said, to at some point soon, and it'll be in our lifetime, at some point soon to have breakfast in Delhi, lunch in Dhaka, and dinner in Rangoon. I mean, to have that, and one of the things that we've been very happy to see has been the improvement in relations with India, how the boundary dispute seems to be on its way to being resolved, and on the one hand, you've got India. On the other hand, you've got Burma, Myanmar, which is a country that's clearly on the rise, which is a country with huge potential. If you think Bangladesh has potential, go to Burma and look at the natural resources. Talk about the need for development, for electricity, for telephones, for just basic infrastructure, and that's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for Bangladesh, which is a country with a great labor force, with young people, and it can be done with trade. And it can go all the way from Pakistan, all the way beyond Burma, and that's what we have been talking about in terms of the New Silk Road. And in that development, some of that is going to be governments. It's going to be governments building roads, promoting customs facilitation, making sure that the airports and the ports work. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the private sector. It's going to be young entrepreneurs or local companies that know the region, that have roots. I've met already in Bangladesh several people who were born in Burma or whose parents were born in Burma. So there are these sort of family linkages, of course, obviously with India as well. And you can use that to your advantage. And the creation of that New Silk Road, of that sort of seamless trade route, where borders are become much more flexible, that's an opportunity. And if that opportunity happens, then Bangladesh, which is smack in the middle of it, because geography will be destiny, will benefit greatly from it.
You mentioned private entrepreneurship, but we have quite a few prolific entrepreneurs in the audience. Salman, I know you're with Google Business Group, TEDx Dhaka, formerly QB, and now you're with Green and Red Technologies. I wonder if you can share some of your thoughts on what you do as a social entrepreneur and your work in business.
Thanks, Mike, and very thank you to joining us in the dialogue today. I currently work as a head of sales and marketing in a local tech startup, and one of the great learning from working for a startup like this is how we get to learn so much from the potential of this market right now. In quoting from a statistics last year, since we're talking about economic integration here, not only for governments as well, we all have a huge market for the technology alone. It's a market that's over $6 billion a year industry already. And if you can just simply look into what's happening in our neighboring countries like India, we can see the huge potential that we can even take it in the coming years. And regarding the the Google Business Group, founded last year, just in about 11 months right now. A great case study and a story sharing to all of you would be, nobody had any experience or working together, the whole technology industry itself, the young entrepreneurs, the startup companies, the medium-sized enterprises. And as we form this community, it's a volunteering community, and we bring people every single month, more men and women coming together, sharing their stories together, and we report back to the Google. So it's a Google local initiative here. And in just about 11 months' time, we've recently been awarded and not only ranked the #1 Google Business Group community in the world out of 65 communities worldwide. And I think itself, and the reason this happened is not because we're organizing events, it's also because of the feedback that we are feeding back to the global community and the way the global community is even learning from us. And the GBG has become an example, which we're going to be going to present next month in Indonesia for Google Search Summit, talking about what's happening in this country. And I think this is a nice gateway. We're talking about Silk Route. I think this is a nice way of exchanging with people and giving them an exposures to the full potential that we have in our country right now, and can strengthen our ability to invest, get foreign investments furthermore.
I think regional integration, I think, is very, very important. I mean, personally, the concept of Myanmar really excites me as an entrepreneur. And of course, having said that, there are certain policies which I think in Bangladesh the government needs to improve on or perhaps enhance. For example, mobility of capital is not allowed in Bangladesh. Bangladeshi entrepreneurs cannot invest abroad. Hence, we can't take advantage of the conducive business environment Myanmar has. So we need to figure out a way how to bring Myanmar perhaps into Bangladesh. We know they're resource rich. Yeah. We do have a gas issue in Bangladesh, which is a hindrance towards further industrial growth. So I hope that this greater regional cooperation through the Silk Road, that perhaps if we could import gas into the country, enhance our industries, export to Myanmar and the entire world, I think that would further enhance Bangladesh's true potentials and the opportunities that the country has. And hopefully over time, if we can mitigate certain issues as political instability and henceforth, I think Bangladesh really does have the capacity to grow much further.
Final question. We started off the show talking about the United States and Bangladesh's current relationship as seen through the partnership dialogue. What can we expect down the road for the future of U.S. and Bangladesh's relations?
I think relations are bright. I think I was pleased, very pleased, to see the level of trust and cooperation among our two groups, our two delegations. We understand each other. We admire each other. Again, we very much admire the development that has gone on in this country. And I think we've got a pretty clear understanding of what we need to do. I think you will see continued efforts on our part to be helpful on the workers' rights and safety issues. You'll see more interest on our part to try and work with Bangladesh to diversify its trade. I think you'll see much more work on the new Silk Road as well. And we'll also see, and this is something that I personally am very interested in working on, you'll see more emphasis on trying to incorporate the 500,000 plus Bangladeshi Americans living in the U.S. to try and get them involved in business in this country. So we were very pleased with our dialogue, and we look forward to continuing what I think is a wonderful relationship.
I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary Fernandez. And thank you, panelists, for joining us and offering your insights on the show. Doshok, that's all from us. See you next month on A Conversation with Bangladesh. Stay tuned and stay with Desh TV.